I'm on a mission, or more of an epic adventure, to explore some of the greatest castles ever built across the UK, Europe and beyond. Each one with its own story of power, ambition and survival. From towering medieval fortresses to forgotten ruins lost to time. So join me as we uncover the secrets behind history's most incredible strongholds. My first fortress exploring adventure takes me across the UK to Wales. But first we're going to make a quick pit stop on the way to explore one of the UK's most iconic castles. Overlooking the River Avon, Warwick Castle isn't just stone and towers, it's a time machine. Nearly 1,000 years of battles, politics and royalty echo through the walls. From Norman invaders to Tudor kings, this castle has seen it all. England has just fallen to William the Conqueror after the Norman conquest at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. To keep control, he scatters wooden forts all across the land. A couple of years later in 1068 at Warwick, a Motte and Bailey castle rises, a wooden tower perched on an earth mound overlooking the river. These early castles were brutal symbols of King William's Norman power. Fast forward to the 12th century and the wooden walls are gone. Warwick begins its transition from wood to stone, with the most significant rebuild occurring in 1260, where the castle was completely transformed into the stone structure you see today. Across Europe, the same transformation was happening. Timber gave way to towers of rock, thick curtain walls, great keeps, fortified gatehouses. Castles weren't just shelters anymore. They were military machines, and Warwick's golden sandstone still glows today with that transformation. Warwick Castle was a defensive masterpiece. The gatehouse, with its iron portcullis, drawbridge and murder holes, where attackers could be bombarded with arrows, boiling water, hot sand or rocks dropped from above through small holes. This made trying to enter the fortress a death trap for attackers. And this wasn't unique. A lot of castles across Europe used the same tricks, turning a stone fortress into a deadly weapon. By the time of the Tudors, castles were changing. Gunpowder made high walls less useful, and palaces began to outshine fortresses. Warwick didn't fade though, it adapted. Henry VIII himself would have visited here. Imagine the Tudor court sweeping through these halls. Less about swords and siege, more about feasts and display of power. Castles like Warwick were no longer military. They were theatres of royalty. By the 17th century, Warwick had completed its transformation. The Great Hall glittered with tapestries and chandeliers. The battlements still stood, but now they were backdrops for aristocratic life. Across Europe, the same story unfolded. Castles evolving into grand residents, symbols of wealth rather than war. Back to the castle's incredible architectural design, significant additions were made in the 14th century, including Guy's Tower and Caesar's Tower, standing at 150 feet high. Two massive watchtowers designed to spot threats and protect the castle during turbulent medieval wars. The dungeon was also built under Warwick Castle during this time, which held everyone from common criminals to political prisoners, all trapped in the castle's cold, unforgiving depths. Today, Warwick Castle is alive again. Jousting tournaments, flaming trebuchets, actors bringing history to life. You can still climb the towers, peer down the walls and imagine a clash of steel echoing below. Nearly 1,000 years after William's first fort, Warwick stands as one of the finest survivors of England's medieval past. A place where history isn't just remembered, it's lived. With our first castle on this trip completed, it's time to hit the road again, leaving England and heading west into the beautiful and scenic Snowdonia in North Wales. A land of mountains, stunning coastline and epic castles carved into the landscape. High on a rocky ridge in Gwynedd, Wales, overlooking Snowdonia and the Irish Sea, stands Castell Harlech, a fortress that has watched over this land for more than 7 centuries. Built by King Edward I in the late 13th century, it remains one of the most remarkable symbols of medieval power and endurance. Through 2 decisive campaigns at the end of the 13th century, Edward I, the King of England, conquered Wales and ended centuries of native rule. His authority was enforced not only by force of arms, but by stone, a ring of mighty castles built to secure the region and control its population, which we know as the Ring of Iron. Under English law and governance, Wales was reshaped, and the title of Prince of Wales was later bestowed upon Edward's son. After his conquest of Wales in 1282, King Edward I sought not just to control the land, but to keep it. To stamp his authority on this wild and independent region, he began one of the most ambitious building programs in medieval Europe. Edward's Iron Ring castles stretched from the mountains of Snowdonia to the coastlines of Gwynedd. Edward built a chain of mighty fortresses. Each castle, many of which we'll be visiting on this trip, were both fortresses and a statement, a symbol of Edward's dominance. Designed by his master architect James of St George, these castles were masterpieces of military engineering, blending precision, symmetry and strategy. Together, they created a network that could communicate, resupply and defend the conquered lands. More than 7 centuries later, these fortresses still tell the story of Edward's ambition and the fierce resistance that rose against it. Harlech was among the finest of these fortresses. It rose from the cliffs somewhere between 1283 and 1289. The design of Harlech Castle is pure strategy. A concentric fortress with 2 rings of walls, mighty towers, and a gatehouse that could withstand armies. And nature played its part. The steep cliffs made assault almost impossible. Harlech wasn't just strong, it was clever. The castle's most famous feature is the Way from the Sea, a steep staircase of 108 steps leading to a fortified watergate. In times of siege, supplies could arrive by ship while enemies surrounded the landward side. Its towers gave archers perfect firing angles. Narrow arrow slits, murder holes, and a deep well inside meant the garrison could hold out for months, possibly even years. Harlech's walls soon saw war. In 1294 it survived the Welsh uprising thanks to that sea gate. But in 1404, during Owen Glendower's revolt, the Welsh captured it, and for 5 years Harlech became his royal seat. Later, during the War of the Roses, Harlech endured one of the longest sieges in British history, 7 long years before it fell in 1468. Even centuries later, during the English Civil War, Harlech stood loyal to the king until 1647 and was one of the last royalist castles to surrender. Castles like Harlech marked a turning point in medieval architecture. Most early fortresses were simple mounds and timber walls. Edward's generation of castles, however, represented precision engineering. Stone-built, layered defences and designed for siege warfare. What made Harlech unique was its relationship with the sea. While most castles relied on land routes, Harlech's defenders could be supplied from the coast. An innovation that helped it outlast almost every other stronghold. Today its ruins stand silent, but their geometry, the balance of form and function, still tells the story of a perfect medieval fortress. Harlech Castle isn't just a ruin on a hill, it's a survivor. A monument of human ingenuity and endurance. Every stone, every stair, every tower was built to resist both man and time. And though its soldiers are long gone, its spirit remains carved forever into the cliffs of Wales. As we move on from Harlech along the Welsh coastline, the story changes. Not every castle here was built for conquest. Some were already standing when Edward I arrived. Perched high above Cardigan Bay, Criccieth Castle was built to command both land and sea. From this rocky headland, its walls overlook the coastline, watching the approaches by water and the routes inland. Criccieth Castle was originally built in the early 13th century by the Welsh prince Llewellyn the Great during a period of growing ambition and increasing uncertainty in Wales. Its location was carefully chosen, not just for defence, but for dominance. From here, the castle controlled coastal sea routes along Cardigan Bay and helped secure Gwyneth's western frontier. At a time when power was shifting and alliances were fragile, castles like Criccieth acted as both military strongholds and symbols of rulership, visible statements of authority carved into the landscape. Unlike the vast fortresses built later by Edward I, Criccieth began its life as a native Welsh stronghold. Its defences relied heavily on natural terrain. The steep headland made direct assault difficult, while the exposed approaches allowed defenders clear views of anyone moving towards the walls. After Edward I's conquest of Wales in 1283, Criccieth fell into English hands. Edward strengthened the castle, adding stone defences and a twin-towered gatehouse facing the land, a clear signal of where the main threat was expected to come from. While Harlech Castle, which we visited earlier, was designed to withstand long sieges with layered walls and access to the sea for resupply, Criccieth relied on its position. There were no massive concentric defences here. Instead, height, visibility and control of movement became its primary strengths. Its final destruction came during the Welsh uprising led by Owen Glyndwr in the early 15th century. The castle was attacked and deliberately burned. Unlike Harlech, which endured years of siege and occupation, Criccieth was never fully rebuilt. From here, the journey continues north through the Welsh countryside, towards an iconic fortress designed to dominate in scale, symbolism and intent. Rising above the Menai Strait, Caernarfon Castle is one of the most powerful symbols of English rule in Wales. Unlike the castles we've visited before, this fortress wasn't built just for defence. It was designed to project authority, identity and empire. Caernarfon Castle holds a unique place in British history. In 1969, these walls became the stage for the investiture of Prince Charles as the Prince of Wales, a modern ceremony rooted in a medieval tradition. The title itself dates back to Edward I, who created it for his son in the late 13th century following the conquest of Wales. From that moment on, Caernarfon became inseparable from the idea of English rule over the region. The ceremony was watched by millions around the world, and for many people today, it's a moment made even more familiar through popular culture, including scenes portrayed in the series like The Crown, filmed here at Caernarfon Castle, where the symbolism, tension and history behind the event are brought back into focus. Walking through the town towards Caernarfon Castle today, it quickly becomes clear that this place was designed to overwhelm. The castle doesn't simply overlook the town, it encloses it. Edward I planned Caernarfon as a complete English stronghold, where castle, walls, streets and harbour all worked together to project control. Construction began in the 1280s following Edward's invasion of Wales. Unlike Criccieth, which began as a Welsh stronghold and was later adapted, Caernarfon was built entirely under English rule, part of Edward's Iron Ring, and arguably its most symbolic castle. What makes Caernarfon unique is how closely it is tied to the town itself. The castle and town walls form a single defensive system, enclosing a planned English settlement. Welsh inhabitants were pushed out, while English settlers lived under the protection and authority of the fortress above them. Architecturally, Caernarfon stands apart from anything we've encountered so far on our travels, and highly unusual for British castles of this period. Its polygonal towers and distinctive banded stonework break from traditional British castle design. These features weren't chosen purely for defence, they were designed to evoke imperial power, deliberately echoing the walls of ancient Constantinople. Edward wanted Caernarfon to resemble the seat of an empire. This wasn't just a fortress, it was propaganda in stone. Inside the walls, the scale becomes even more apparent. Towers rise not just for protection, but for dominance. Narrow passages, heavy doors and deep chambers below ground remind us that Caernarfon was also a place of control, used to confine prisoners, suppress rebellion and enforce English authority. While kings didn't live here permanently, Caernarfon functioned as a centre of government. Officials administered the region from within these walls, and the presence of the castle ensured that resistance could be met swiftly and decisively. The castle's symbolic role continued long after its military importance faded. In 1284, Edward's son was born here, Edward of Caernarfon, later Edward II. That moment permanently tied the castle to the title of Prince of Wales, a connection that still shapes Britain's history today. Standing on the walls now, looking out across the Menai Strait, it's easy to see the logic behind the site. Control the water, control movement, control the town, control the region. And yet, for all its ambition, Caernarfon was never fully finished. Some towers remain incomplete, a reminder that even the most powerful kings faced limits. Here at Caernarfon, what remains is one of the clearest expressions of conquest, symbolism, and authority ever built in stone. A castle designed not just to defend land, but to reshape a nation. Caernarfon Castle stands as one of the clearest expressions of power in medieval Britain, where architecture, politics and conquest were fused into stone. Next time, from a ruined castle resting in the shadow of the mountains, to a vast fortress of wealth, power and grandeur, and a picture-perfect castle surrounded by water. Be sure to join me as we continue this epic North Wales adventure.